I'm going to ask our next speaker, Stormy Peters, who is head of community at GitHub, to come up to the stage and join me. And we're going to have a bit of a fireside chat with her. So Stormy, I've known you a long time, and I was talking about you last night, and I was talking about you in terms of Mozilla. Do you want to just introduce yourself for anybody in the room who doesn't know you as well as I do?
So I'm Stormy Peters. I've spent a long career helping open source software be successful. I really think that collaborating is the way of the future. And so I've dedicated my career to helping people learn open source software and teaching communities and companies and governments all how to work together so that we can create a better world.
And there's been a lot going on that you've been engaged with, I know, through GitHub in the last 18 months. Can you tell me a bit about how you see AI impacting open source?
So AI is definitely impacting open source. On GitHub last year, we saw 65,000 generative AI projects created in just 1 year. And the UK was one of the top 5 contributors to those projects. And it makes developers happier. When we talk to developers, 90% of them say they are happier using AI. It makes them faster. They're 55% faster. But it's like having a pair programmer that's always offering you the piece of information you need. So we're looking at how do we continue, and one of the things that really excites me is that it's really helping people learn how to code. I taught myself how to program. And I think these days with online development environments like Codespaces and with AI tools like Copilot, it's possible for kids and adults around the world to teach themselves the skills they need. So if they don't have a university or a professor that's going to teach them how to code, they can get started, and their AI Copilot or another AI tool will help them with suggestions and help them learn how to code. And I think it's more important than ever in this world of AI that everybody understand what coding can do for them and has those resources available to them. So I'm super excited. We have 5 million students signed up for GitHub Education, and they're around the world. So they're students that don't necessarily have a professor to help them out, and they're learning how to code.
It's really interesting. I can't code, and I can't code. They tried to teach me in high school, and I was told to stay away from computers because my code never ran. Not once. Like in a year of being taught it, it just didn't run. I don't know. I type and I touch type, so I probably hit the wrong keys. And I wonder if that would teach me. I might try again with that.
I think in your
tool.
Copious free time, you should try it out.
My copious free time. Yeah okay. I'm sharing it with these people. Okay, I will try that out. And obviously, the community in this room can code, or a lot of them can code. They're not like me. How do we see these tools actually helping that community and those people at a different level, beyond just the education and the starting point?
Yeah, so we know it makes you faster. I tried to use an analogy yesterday of it's kind of like when you're cooking and you pull the recipe up and it has some weird word you've never heard of. If you don't cook like me, it tells you to braise the chicken and you're like, what am I supposed to do? And AI can just tell you what that is right in the moment that you need it. Or it can tell you that you're missing something. It's like a tool that's a helper for you so that you can stay in the flow. I said that we know that developers are happier when they're using AI. We also know that the professors are able to upskill their students' learning. So like Professor Noah Gift at Duke University said that his students can actually solve bigger, more challenging problems when they're learning how to code. So they have to worry less about like the syntax and how to put the pieces together, and they can think more about the problem that they're trying to solve. So I think for developers, it's going to make us all more effective and allow us to think about bigger problems instead of worrying about resolving that piece of code that we've already done 100 times in our past, but we just need it again here.
Yeah. It hasn't all been straightforward. There's been a level of controversy around AI and software development and litigation and potential litigation. Are you able to talk about that a little bit?
So I think with any new technology, we have to figure out how it fits. Like we heard of the previous speaker, we're figuring out how AI fits into our society and how we can use it. And so at GitHub, we're really trying to listen to developers, to all of you, to figure out how you want your code, how you want to develop code, how you want to share that code, and trying to provide you the tools to do that. So I think that we're going to continue to develop those. We have open source licenses. We built open source on the back of copyright law, which maybe wasn't a perfect tool for it, but we enabled open source software development. And now we're looking at what other, as anyone in open source software knows, it's not just the license that makes the project. You have to have governance, you have to have community, you have to have ways of working. All of those things make your open source software project successful. And the same thing's going to happen, the same thing is happening with AI. And we need to like talk together, work together to figure out how we want this to fit into our society, how we want to create our code, how we want to share that code. I think, as I said, we're still learning.
Yeah.
So like at GitHub, we're listening to developers, and one of the things that we heard is that when people get a code suggestion, if there's something similar in another piece of code, they would like to know where it came from. So we've added a feature that tells you the repo that it came from and the license that it was under, so that you can explore all the other places that that code was used. Sometimes it's in thousands of places.
Right, so we should pause on that, the licensing. And we were talking a bit about licensing yesterday. It's inevitable when you talk about the future of open source. And not only can I not code, despite being an ex-lawyer, I'm probably not the licensing nerd that you all think I am. Open source licensing is something that people are so passionate about. You know, the old conversations I used to have started with IANLA, and then I knew there was a but coming, so I am not a lawyer, but, and then they would tell me I was wrong about a license. How is licensing fitting into this picture? You know, it's a difficult, you've obviously got this new tool. Can you just explain that a little bit more to us?
Yeah, so open source software was made possible because of copyright law. You're an attorney, I'm not
No,
an
I'm just
attorney.
going to watch you tell me that law.
It wasn't a perfect tool at the time, but it enabled us
Yeah.
to figure out how to share software. It enabled people around the world to create software together. It enabled companies that didn't typically collaborate to work together on that software. So it's been game-changing, world-changing. But like I said, it's not enough by itself. We've had to come up with lots of other processes, ways of working, ways of sharing code, ways of submitting issues, standards of practices for when they're reviewed. So there's a lot of other pieces that had to come with it.
Absolutely.
And I really think the same is true for AI. We need to work together to see, is it making you happier? Is it not making you happier? Is there a way that you could collaborate better? Like, I'm here and all of us are here to learn from each other. So I think it's going to continue to evolve.
I think that's right, and I think one of the conversations yesterday, Peter Zeitstep was sitting over here in the controversial chair, and as they were talking about that, it's very clear to us that open source is about community, as Neil also alluded to. It's about that contribution and collaboration and that bigger picture, not just the licensing. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm passionate about is making sure that people can have a career in open source software. Mm-hmm. And so I think the funding models haven't been there yet. Like, it's still 20 years ago, if you got a paycheck to work on open source software, that was like a dream job. That was amazing. Yeah. But that's still the only primary way we have to create a career in open source software. You have to get a paycheck from a company. And with all of the brilliant ideas that are coming out of people, the 65,000 public repos that have AI in them, you shouldn't have to go get a job doing something else when you have a brilliant idea of your own and all the Fortune 500 companies are using it. So I think along with AI, we should make sure that we're producing new funding models and career opportunities for people.
I absolutely agree with you, and I hope there are people in the room who are not from the Home Office, not from DCIT, but from other UK government departments, and those government departments work on funding. And we have been talking to them, which is why they're in the room, and I'm very much hoping that as we go forward, one of the things OpenUK aims to do with them is to get the information about funding that is appropriate to open source, whether it's in AI or otherwise, and to share that with the community that's growing around this conference, that's growing around OpenUK, to help funnel you into the right sources of funding. Because it is hard, and that paycheck, I got my first paycheck in open source 16 years ago, not 20, but then building something that allows you a business model, if you're off on your own, that is going to enable those millions of companies to use your code. I think Mike said yesterday he had 30 million companies using Homebrew. I mean, it's just incredible, right? And it's like, how does he make money?
And that software would be even better if some of that money funneled back to the original developers and they could spend more time improving it.
Yeah, so going back to AI as we sort of think about wrapping up our chat, Stormy, how do you see the future evolving for AI and open source?
So I believe that it's people in the room here that are going to make it possible. I think I think AI will make it easier for people to learn how to code. So I think we will see a lot more people join our ranks. So I hope all of us are welcoming to them, but I think it'll be a global phenomenon. I think it'll be people that didn't typically code that will join. I think that we'll see new funding models. We're trying at GitHub with experiments. We have GitHub sponsors that lets companies or individuals fund it. We have an accelerator program for open source software projects to help them explore what's next. We're learning from them. And I think, sorry, I had a third point, but I forgot it. But
well, while you think about that, one of the things, see if it comes back to you, one of the things that we did in our AI report last week, we worked with Runa Capital, who have been helping us to mine GitHub data. And we get that quarterly now, so we can track contribution from individuals and we can track the repos in the UK. And every November, we're going to publish an annual skills report showing how we build this community in the UK, and hopefully we grow it through OpenUK. But we also look in the report we published last week at the AI repos in the UK, which is how we know that AutoGPT from Edinburgh is the fastest growing anywhere in the world. So that GitHub data may not be perfect, but it's a great way for us to start to recognize the contributions that people are making. So it's super helpful to us. Did you remember the third point?
I didn't, but there are 3.4 million developers on GitHub from the UK.
That's good to know, because it was 3.2 the last time I looked.
It's 3.4 now.
3.4.
And they're in the top 5 contributors to AI projects, as I said before. So there's a growing community here.
There really is, and that top 5 in the world stays at number 1 in Europe. But with 3.2 million, it's a shame. Dr. Jennifer Barth, who does our research, was here yesterday and isn't here today, although I'm better at arithmetic
I think
than she
3.2 million is a pretty good number.
Well, 3.2 is a bit, so 3.4 is even better. And at 3.2, we had 4.7%. Am I getting that right? Can anybody tell me if I've got it wrong? It's either 4.7 or 4.9% of the UK per capita had a GitHub account. And whilst India might have 9 million GitHub accounts and the US is more, we were marginally ahead of the US per capita. So we were number 1 in the world per capita with GitHub accounts. And that's the traditional way of measuring open source developers. So although we might be number 5 globally, I'm going to assert that we're number 1 in the world in one instance of it as well. Stormy, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate the chat.
Thanks, Amanda.